Hey Gardener, Taylor here from the Community Garden Podcast. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to provide you with some housekeeping items before we get started. If you're new to the podcast, every week, every 2 weeks, the beginning of the podcast gets updated. So the information that I'm delivering to you right now is relevant and will be removed when it's no longer relevant. So if you've already heard this, if you're binge watching or binge listening, fast forward to about 5 or 6 minutes and we'll launch into the actual episode. So for today, it is currently the week of October 20th. And for folks in the Northern Hemisphere or for folks who are in similar zones, I'm in zone 6B and my first frost date is supposed to be early October. It's now October 20th and we still haven't actually had a frost, but the plants are starting to be damaged from the cold. We're getting about -3 degrees Celsius overnight right now, at least tonight. So we're pretty much done in the garden now. If you haven't had a chance, go into your garden and just remove. Actually, you could technically leave your entire garden, but if you're planning to remove anything from your garden, go ahead and snip the plants at the base. Don't actually pull them up out of the soil as long as they weren't diseased. You can go ahead and let them break down into the soil, and it also helps with better water access for next year, getting water down into the soil, and will help a little bit with soil erosion. If your plants were diseased, pull them out fully. You can also leave all of your plants over winter. You do not need to take them out of your garden. Don't let anyone make you think so. So now that we're done with the season, there's likely nothing else coming out of your garden. I still have a few loofahs, some flowers still going, a couple of small things, but for the most part, the season is over, folks. So my suggestion to you over the next couple of weeks, this will probably be the last time I update this until realistically November, December. I would really love for you to make notes about your gardening season. Please, please, please journal. Write down the things that you learned this year. Write down the things that you want to do differently next year. Write your observations down. Write your questions down. Write all your ideas down. Spring you will thank winter you, okay? Please. Also, as you're out in your garden mourning its loss, if you see any seeds that have matured, you can go ahead and pop them off your plants. Marigolds are a really fun way to save seeds. You'll wait for the seed heads to, become dry and crunchy, and they usually turn black. You can go ahead and pop them off. You can store them in a paper bag. There's lots of fun plants to pull seeds off of. Snapdragons, the little heads turn brown, and then they have little holes in the top, and you can flip it over and shake the seeds into your hand. Another fun one is coriander or cilantro. It's very obvious when the seeds are ready, so take a peek at the plants that are still in your garden, see if you can pull any seeds off them. Also, this is for anyone listening to this podcast. If you've ever thought about organizing a community garden, requesting a community garden in whatever area you live in, now is the time to start thinking about that if you have any sort of winter break. So right now, we're not going to be gardening now until March, April. So we do all of our prep work during the winter months. So this is when we take new garden requests. This is when we assess new sites. We discuss partnerships with different organizations. So if this is something that you have been personally wanting to do or your organization has been wanting to do, now is the time to start prepping. Okay, let's talk about some local activities. So these are folks who are in Southern Ontario. You live in Brantford, Brant County, Hamilton, Haldimand, Norfolk, and you want to get involved with our organization. We have a couple of things coming up that I want to put on your radar. So we are participating in the Brantford Santa Claus Parade. November 30th, we are having another parade float. Last year, we had a really fun 50-foot parade float. One of our volunteers, Ken, built a massive greenhouse on the float. I made a bunch of vegetable costumes. They were like sandwich board costumes. It was so much fun. The float definitely was DIY, but it was so cute and we really had a blast doing it together. So we're going to be doing it again this year. If you want to participate, our parade committee is going to be meeting on October 20th in the evening virtually, and you can get that link from me by emailing grow@egcgbrant.ca, or you can take a peek at our show notes page for the podcast and click the Contact Us button, and that would be the communitygardenpodcast.ca. So Santa Claus Parade, come join us. You get to dictate how much time you can give. You do not need to have any experience. Next thing, so this is very exciting. A couple of years ago, we hosted an Earth Day Community Garden Building Festival. Earth Day Community Building Festival, and we're going to be kind of re-envisioning that festival as a garden festival this year located at the Greenhouse and Learning Center. It'll be the grand opening. So that'll be happening in June of 2025. It's now all hands on deck to get this festival planned. So if you want to volunteer with us on the committee on the day of, whatever the case is, email grow@egcgbrant.ca or go to the show notes page. We're also looking for organizations who want to participate in an educational way or, have some sort of offering day of. So if you work in the horticulture, green space, environmental, gardening world, and you have something educational to offer or something of value to offer during the festival and you want to promote the organization or you want to participate, reach out, please. If you have ever thought about joining the board of directors for Eagle Ground Community Gardens, we will be having our annual general meeting in January. This is just something for you to start thinking about now. We're always recruiting for director positions as well as for committee lead positions. So I will update this when we have the final date, but our AGM's in January, and just start thinking maybe you want to get involved on the back end. We also are hosting a tree planting event at the new greenhouse site on November 2nd at 10 a.m. So you can come. Please ensure you are wearing closed-toed shoes, although it's a little too cold to be wearing sandals anyways, and consider bringing a shovel and some drinking water. We're going to be planting a permaculture orchard. This will give you a good opportunity to see the greenhouse, to see the park before maybe other folks have been able to. Also, Belonging Brant, we mentioned this in episode 8 with Armanda Lambert. Belonging Brant is hosting the ABCD Symposium for 2025 in May, and we are currently planning for the symposium. We're looking for community members to come join our committee. So if this is something that interests you, you want to learn more about ABCD, asset-based community development, shoot me a message. And finally, for my organizations that are listening, I have a couple of recommendations for you. If you haven't gotten to it yet, episode 9 with Roger Doran is about seed money. It's a fundraising platform for community gardens. It is a global platform. Please check out that episode and register for a seed money campaign. Your registration has to be in by November 12th, and then the campaign for anyone listening runs from November 15th to December 15th. And look into all the campaigns that are running and please consider donating. There is an Ontario Agriculture Infrastructure Grant due October 31st. If you've ever thought about building a greenhouse with your community garden organization, this may be a grant opportunity for you. And if you just Google Ontario Agriculture Infrastructure, it should come up. It's due by October 31st. There's also a grant right now through the Ontario Trillium Foundation. It's their Grow Grant. It's due by November 4th. And this allows various organizations to sustain their operations. It has nothing to do with gardening. But if you have been looking for an operations or a programming grant, this may be the grant for you. So I just wanted to share some of these pieces with you. I apologize. This is a little bit longer than normal. It's because I love to talk. Yeah, we're at 8 minutes. So I'm going to let you go. We're going to get into the episode now. I hope you enjoy it. As always, you can always reach out to us at podcast@egcgbrant. You can reach out to us through the show notes page at the communitygardenpodcast.ca. Email me, message me, send us a message on social media. I'm always happy to answer questions and help you out. Okay, let's get started. Hey gardener, you're listening to the Community Garden Podcast. I'm your host, Taylor. In this space, we'll dig into the dirt with local gardeners of all skill levels to share tips, tricks, and stories from our gardening adventures. Let's get growing. Hello, gardeners. If you've been here for a while, you will recognize this as my sick voice because I am sick again. I do not know what is going on this year. I've never been this sick before in my life. I have just a raging cold right now. So I'm going to keep the talking to a minimum this week just because it's kind of gross. And I actually almost debated skipping this week, but ultimately decided we must push through. We must persevere. I can't leave you hanging. So I'm super excited about our interview this week. We're chatting with Kat Schneider, who is the president of Eagle Ground Community Gardens. So Kat's been with Eagle Ground now for 7 years and has been the president for 2 years, one of which was interim, and took over for Cheryl and Toski, which are big boots to fill. Big boots to fill. So Kat and I's conversation is less of an interview and more of a conversation, honestly. I was an active participant. Kat and I think if we had the chance, we would never be quiet. We had so much to talk about. And this conversation was less community garden based and more just homestead based. So we chatted about Kat's origin story and how she came into gardening, which is very unique, and just kind of got thrown into it because of her desire to find community. And we also talked about the process of Eco Ground launching the host garden program. Kat had a very active role in our host garden program. So you can hear more about that program. And then in our show notes, you can register for 2025. We also had a very lengthy conversation about chicken and duck ownership, which I know is not exactly community garden related, but I know a lot of the folks who are listening desire to be homesteaders or maybe have a small plot of land, or honestly, you don't even need to have a lot of land. I did ducks for quite a while here in town. So you do have opportunities. So listen in, listen on for information about how both of us tended to chickens and ducks. And if you listen to the end of the episode, I have an update for you about my ducks. You're going to want to listen. We also chatted a little bit about beekeeping as well. I do beekeeping. And then there was some general information, gardening information thrown in there. We chatted a little bit about cabbage moths and trap crops and things like that. So we're just going to dive right in. I think you'll enjoy this one. Hello, Kat. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Do you want me to call you Kat or Caitlin?
It really doesn't matter.
Okay, I'm going to go with Kat.
That's fine.
How I know you.
I figured, yeah.
Everyone else will call you Caitlin, and I'm like, who? They're like, Caitlin. I'm like, I don't know who you're talking about. And they're like, with Equal Ground. I'm like, are you talking about Kat? They're like, oh, maybe.
I think
like,
so. I know, because I sign off emails Caitlin sometimes, but then when it's the board, I use Kat, because then it's confusing.
You were introduced to me as Kat, and it'll be like that forever now.
That's okay.
I try, if we're doing like something formally, I'll try to call you Caitlin, but
it sounds weird from certain people.
Yeah, it feels weird saying it because I only call you Kat, right?
I agree.
Somebody said something to Alex the other day about Caitlin too, and he was like, "Who is Caitlin?" I was like, "It's Kat." He's like, "Kat's name's Caitlin,
right?" Yeah, and it's like Kat's with a K and Caitlin's with a C.
Mm-hmm.
So it's totally
different.
Off. Yeah, my husband doesn't call me Kat ever.
He calls you Caitlin.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone call you Kate?
No, never. No, Kate and Katie were never allowed, so it's not even. It's not even an
so
option.
So it's Caitlin or Kat.
Yep.
Yeah. I love that. Mm-hmm. So if you just want to introduce yourself and talk about your background with the organization, anyone listening now knows that your name is Caitlin. So we've got that
we
covered.
got that part? Okay.
And then, how are you involved with our organization and where are you growing?
So I'm the current president of Eco Grounds Community Gardens. This is my first year as president.
I think first year as paper, but you were interim last year.
Yes, yeah, that's right, because Cheryl had left like midway.
Yeah.
I've been with Eco Grounds. I was trying to think about this on my way over, to be honest, because it's all just blended together. Mm-hmm. But I believe I started as a volunteer in 2018. So I've been with the organization for a couple of years now, anyways. And then we are currently growing into the county. So we have... You're better at the numbers, to be honest.
In the county, we have, so this year we had about 72 host gardeners, and I want to say at least 60% of them are in the county.
Which is huge, yeah.
And then we have, I know you're saying better with numbers, but I think we have 5 community gardens in the county.
Yes.
We have Mount Pleasant, Scotland, now we have St. George. Mm-hmm. We have 2 in Paris.
Paris, yep.
That's 5.
Mm-hmm. I think that's it.
And I'm also bugging them to do Burford in 2026 because they're putting in a new park there. I was talking to Jake, our county rep, about it the other day. And then also he mentioned Glen Morris as well.
Oh, perfect. So
maybe 2 more by 2026.
That's exciting. Yeah, I feel like for the county, we really started to grow during COVID when we opened up the host garden program because we couldn't go into the community gardens. So then that reached into the community. And now Jake's been a great contact at the county. And he's really helped spearhead that. So it's nice to have more gardens out there for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you've been with Equal Ground for how long?
7 years.
7 years, yes. And you helped open up Spring Street Bug Park around the corner.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I started there as a volunteer. I was actually volunteering at what is now Moto Yoga. It was Moksha Yoga with Marcus. He was the previous owner.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him one day just about like how the homeless population in Brantford was getting like, I was noticing it because I lived on Green River Ave, right? And then I was walking to the studio, which is on Deleuze or Coburn Street.
Yeah, you're walking through
a pretty nice
space.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, we should like get a garden out front and like they can grab some food or whatever. And then he's like, oh, actually, I'm already volunteering at Spring Street Garden. Do you want to do this with me? So then I went to one of the board meetings and then I've just never left. So then I volunteered at Spring Street Buck Park, and I was the champion there for a couple of years and helped replace the beds and get some volunteers there. And I love that space. It's really nice. The community around there is really involved, which is nice. And
by the time this episode comes out, or this interview, we've actually interviewed Ruby, who is the current champion there. So for anyone who's been listening to these episodes in chronological order, you'll actually have a pretty good history of Spring Street Buck Park. It's the one where we interviewed Ruby. And so if you've already listened to that episode, then you'll kind of know a little bit of history of the space, or at least how the space operates now. Mm-hmm. So this is the same garden that we're talking about here. Because Kat, we used to be neighbors, except it was only for a year when we didn't know each other. So we didn't know we were neighbors until she had moved. But yeah, same garden. And we've since actually updated the beds again. We put in galvanized steel, and probably the most active garden we have. I'm on the volunteer list, but there's nothing for me to do. So Ruby,
which is a good problem to have.
Yeah, Ruby leaves me off the schedule because she knows I'm doing other gardens too. So I'll pop over there. Like I went and got a harvested beans the other day, and we had beans for dinner. And I actually went to get herbs for one of my workshops for the Boys and Girls Club, but Ruby had just done a full trim of the herbs. So I just grabbed some beans and
it's such a nice space now that we redid the park over there too. It's beautiful. Yeah.
If anyone hasn't visited, it's Spring Street Buck Park on Spring Street. It's near BCI here in Brantford, Brantford Collegiate Institute. It's a really nice garden. Yeah, I agree. So you've been with Eagle Ground for quite a while. You're now our lovely president, leading the way for us. Kat, can you go into a little bit of background on how you got started gardening, how long you've been gardening for, all the way up to where you're gardening now?
Sure, yeah. I started gardening in 2018 when I joined the board, to be completely honest. Like, I've always done, like, my home gardens, like, with flowers and whatever. It's mainly just hostas, so, like, really wasn't too intense. But then when I bought my house on Grand River, there was such a big space out back. And when I signed up for the board, I started a little bit of vegetable gardening just with like whatever lettuces and random things that were like fairly easy. And then when 2020 hit, we started the host garden program, and we were providing raised beds for everybody in soil. So I took advantage of that. And then I got 6 raised beds, and I definitely did not expect like the sheer volume of how big those gardens were actually going to be.
So was that like 8x4? Is that what you got?
Yep. The 4x8 ones. So it was like a yard and a half of soil in each of them. Like it was a lot for my first like real gardening experience. So, and then because we just got all these amazing donations and everything from our community partners. So I just planted everything, and then I ripped up some more of my property and planted a bunch of eggplants like down underneath, like it was like a little hill that we ripped up. And then my husband was like, "What is happening? Like, why do we have so much stuff? Like, it's ridiculous." And it wasn't really like thought out as to like what we're going to eat, what we're going to share, like what we're going to can and do all that stuff. It was literally just like, it's just trial and error. We're going to put whatever we can.
That's the best way.
Yeah. And then you just kind of figure out like what grows, what doesn't grow. Like, and yeah, so that was a neat experience. And because it happened during COVID, I had a lot of time. I took some time off work. So I had a lot of time to like really just tend to it and just watch how things were producing and whatever. So I learned a lot that year. And then from there, we moved out into the country a bit in 2021, I think it was 2021. Yeah. And then I found a piece of property like off the side of my house. It was perfect. It was right in the sun. And I told my husband that we were going to make a garden. And he was like, "No, we're not doing this again." Like, absolutely not. So we did. And it's a 40 by 30 garden.
That's a big one.
Yeah. So the first year we rototilled it, I know like there's different views on that, but the first year we rototilled it just because that was,
of course, when you're starting from scratch, you gotta get the sod up something.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was like the easiest way to do that for us. So we did that, and then I just planted a bunch of stuff. We always get an abundance of tomatoes donations, and I know people always ask, but for whatever reasons, like we just have so many tomatoes. So I just planted so many tomatoes, and then I still have some in my freezer from last year.
For context, for folks listening, and we've talked about this before, the City of Brantford grows a lot of our vegetable plants. And for the 2024 season, we had asked if they could grow us 300 tomatoes, and they grew us 1,200 tomatoes. And it was amazing. It's because they changed the space in which they grow them. Instead of growing them in 6-inch pots, we started growing them in cell packs. And this year specifically, we were just swimming in tomatoes. It was amazing. Alex, I don't like tomatoes, and we have a lot of tomatoes in the garden right now, which you're going to see after this because I'm going to take you outside. And the one day Alex was like, how many tomato plants do we have? Usually we do about 6 because I just don't really like tomatoes. Right. And when I can them, I usually get a couple bushels of them from, farm markets. Yeah. I don't grow them to can them. It wouldn't be enough. And I went outside and I counted our tomato plants, and I have 27 tomato plants outside. And it's just because I kept getting like, oh, this variety looks cool. And we'd go like pick up plants here, and then we'd go pick up plants there. And then we get this plant donation and that plant donation. And I would see new varieties and I'd be like, oh, this looks like fun. And then also I didn't want some of the tomatoes to go to waste. So if they showed up at my house, sometimes when the plants, that's the thing. If I have like 4 plants in my car, like I'm not taking them over to Earl Haig. So I would just plant them in my garden. 27 tomato plants coming from somebody who doesn't like tomatoes. Right. So
yeah, I definitely have, I think there's 6 different varieties, which is the most varieties I've ever grown before. I got a bunch from a guy from work, and they're like heirloom ones, or like they're super cool looking. Yeah. So we'll see. I don't know. I've never tasted them before. We'll see what happens. And so moving forward with my gardening experience, I guess, like this year was the first year we got mulch. I know you're a big proponent for mulch, so I'm super excited about that. We used like just a tree service person.
Who did you? Was it Styes?
Yeah, it was Styes. Yeah. So which was great. They dropped it off. It was an amazing, like it was perfect.
Okay, I'm gonna give some wisdom to the folks listening. I love mulch. This, you've heard me say it before. This will not be the last time I say it. A nice, thick 4 to 6 inches right on top of your garden makes a massive difference. I don't water my garden. I don't have a lot of issues with pests.
The weeds are like,
no weeds.
None.
I've pulled like 5 weeds out of my garden this year. And it's because they were growing before I topped with the mulch. Cat, I've been toting this to Cat now for 2 years. Yes. And a couple months ago, you had expressed that you were having a hard time getting a hold of tree services, and it was just an issue. And I've had other people tell me they're having a hard time getting a hold of them. We have had luck. If you live in the Brant County area, we've had luck with Styes Tree Service. Yep. Maybe I'll put the information in the show notes. We give them a call, and you can do this with other tree services. So if you don't live in the area, do a quick Google search to see what tree removal services exist in your area and call them. These tree service removal companies have to pay to dump their mulch at the dump, like at the landfill. And it's worth it to give them a call and see if instead next time they're in your area, they'll dump it in your driveway for you. And the only thing is you cannot control what type of mulch you get. Just make sure you ask them no black walnut. They're usually pretty good
like Styes anyways knew exactly.
Yeah, like, black walnut has a compound in it called juglone, which can kill a lot of plants. You do not want black walnut mulch, but most tree services are going to be aware of that anyways. So they'll come and they'll drop it in your driveway for you. And I'm sure you had the same experience, we'll tip the driver. For us, it was $50. Yep. Give the driver $50 and they'll come and drop it for you. And they do that because otherwise they have to pay to drop it at a landfill. And it's free mulch. It is not dyed. It's typically fresh chipped that day. So it hasn't been composted. You should be moving the mulch fairly quickly. It heats up very fast because it's going to start composting. So the faster you can move it, the lesser risk you have of this mulch pile potentially starting on fire. It's kind of rare, but you want to be really careful.
And it's 10 yards too.
So that's the other thing. Yeah, you actually cannot control how much mulch you get. So in the past, we've gotten 5 yards. And then when we got another top up this year too, and we got 10 yards. Yeah. And we were like, we have a lot of gardens. So that's the other thing is you cannot control the amount of mulch that you get because they're just going to drop whatever is in their truck. So I suggest calling a neighbor, calling a friend and see if they want some of it. We had Alex's sister and brother-in-law just down the road. They came and got a trailer full too. So just a couple of things to note. You can't control the amount, and also you can't control when they drop it either. They could come in an hour, they could come in 4 days. But it is free mulch and just does wonders for your garden. Yeah. Okay, so you guys got the mulch drop.
We got the mulch. It's been amazing so far. And just aesthetically, it looks so nice. Yeah, I love it.
Yep. And then your chickens are in there scratching the garden.
Yes, yeah. We have chickens. We got chickens last year? Last year was our first year of chickens? Yeah, I think.
It's a good segue. You want to explain, like, what did that process look like getting chickens? What's your setup look like? What does your routine with them look like?
So we've been talking about getting chickens like since we got the property in 2021. And my husband was like, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll get fresh eggs. Yeah.
Not to throw your husband under the bus, but he was okay with chickens, but not the garden.
Yeah.
Or you guys were just so far gone at that point that he just said whatever.
Yeah. He was just like, yeah, it's fine. Just do that. So yeah. Now he just sway back to this. TJ likes going in the garden and he likes to be helpful. And so I said next year, I'm like, I would appreciate it if we could like sit down. And this is on me, I guess, because I'm always like, no, it's my garden. But it's nice to have him help and give his 2 cents too, right? Because then it becomes like a thing that we do together, which is really nice. Like go out after dinner and like do the watering and do all that kind of stuff. So if he has a say in what goes in there, which is mainly just potatoes and jalapenos, then he's involved too. So it's one more piece that like can grow your relationship too in that sense.
Yeah.
But so for the chickens, we had talked about that for a couple of years. So once we moved out to the country, that was definitely something that we wanted to look into. Obviously, I jumped on Pinterest and like was like, oh, we can make this chicken coop and we can do this and we can do this. And like was making this big elaborate thing. So he took a couple of the designs and built this super simple, but like perfect chicken coop. We have 5 chickens. We weren't too sure on how many that we would need or what you would want. Most chickens produce an egg a day, depending on the time of season. In the winter, it's less, obviously, just because it's cold. And then if it's too hot, they don't normally give you an egg either. But for the most part, we get an egg a day from the chickens, which is great. I was a little nervous getting them at first just because you're like, what the heck do I do with these things? So we went through Norwich Feeds out in Burford.
Keep talking.
Okay.
I'll explain my look after.
We went through there. There's not a whole lot of spots around here that I know of that you can buy like chicks direct or chickens direct from. So unfortunately, in that sense, you have to use a hatchery, which I wasn't huge on. So the next time we do buy chickens, I am going to try and outsource it to somewhere that like grows them for you or just we'll get a rooster and we'll do it ourselves.
Yeah. We just obviously did ducks and we ended up getting the eggs from just a small local hobby farm and then we hatched them ourselves. Also, Sharps out of St. George, they also do, they specifically do ducks. I'm pretty sure they do chickens too. You can order either eggs or
cool.
Chicks or ducklings from them. So Sharps does them too. I didn't know Norwich Feeds did them. And we had such an issue trying to find decent duck food because ducks have different needs than chickens do. So no, I was just, the look I gave you is because I'm going to look into Norwich Feeds now.
And the people there are like super helpful, super knowledgeable, obviously. So we've just been dealing with them.
Nice.
So yes, and then my girlfriend and I, before, because we were talking about getting chickens at the same time, we went to a workshop actually at Generations Marketplace. And they hold a whole bunch of different workshops. It's an amazing space. But we went to their chicken owning one and learned so much there about like their different diseases that they can get, the food, how to, like when you're buying new ones, like get different kinds of chickens so you can kind of keep track of like how old your chickens are essentially because they all look the same. Really. So that was a really good experience too. Last year, when we got our chickens, I don't know if you've ever heard of bumblefoot.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Ducks get it too.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just on their feet. It just looks like a little wart or whatever. But
it's like a callus.
Yeah, essentially.
It's an infected callus.
Yeah. So that was an experience trying to navigate that.
And did you do the Epsom salt bath?
Yeah. So I soaked their feet. Yeah. You have to like contain them obviously because they're wild.
I've seen some like containers and they cut like
their
a chicken
homemade
head
ones.
out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was just, we just soaked their feet or whatever. And then you have to like scoop it and pry it out essentially. And then you have to bandage it up. So like all my chickens' feet last year had like little leopard, it's like tensure bandage things on there.
Fun fact, bumblefoot never heals regardless of what you do. So in the duck world, it's typically recommended to just leave it.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I know when I learned that, I was like, really?
Yeah,
and then I started digging a bit further. And bumblefoot is practically like you can't cure. It's just essentially calloused feet.
Yeah.
And you can't cure it and it doesn't harm them, I guess. So I check my duck's feet all the time, but I'm kind of like, if it happens?
I mean, if it's small, I'm like, I'm just leaving it. But if you notice it and it gets bigger, then I'll.
So with the design of their coop, what features does it have?
Right now, so out the back, it has I'm not technical with these terms, but like where they lay their eggs.
Yeah, their roost.
Yeah, their roost or whatever. There's 3 little roosting boxes there. They all decide to lay their eggs in one.
Yeah.
They say that you should have like at least 2, depending on how many chickens you have.
I think it's like 1 for every like 4 chickens
Yeah.
or something. Yeah.
So we did 3 just because that was the design of the one that we were following. But like I said, like they only really used 1. And then in my mind, when we designed this, I wanted like a water box like attached to it, but like so the water jug kind of sits outside of like the full chicken coop so it doesn't get so dirty and stuff. But now they've made that a roost also. Oh, because TJ was putting the water outside. My husband, he was putting the water outside, which is totally fine. But now it's just a roost.
Oh, so there was no water use, and so they were like, "Oh, this looks cozy."
Yeah, so that's where they were laying their eggs.
Oh my god!
And it's on like it sits probably like 2.5, 3 feet off of the ground. Like we made it on like stilts almost. So then they had like a shaded area to go underneath in the summer. And then in the winter, we just blocked off all the sides. So it gives them like they can still go outside and everything, which I guess I was just naive. I don't know what I was thinking before I got chickens. I was like, oh, will they even go outside in the winter? Like, do they like the snow? Which they do. Mm-hmm. And we have super mild winters now anyway. So
climate change.
Yeah. But we blocked off all the sides for the most part. And then they kind of hang out there in the winter. So it gives them like some more space to move around. Mm-hmm. And then my mother-in-law got us one of those automatic doors.
Oh, those things are so cool.
Honestly.
So bad, but it won't work with our layout.
I know this sounds so silly, but it's life-changing. Like, we're up anyways in the morning, but, like, to go out there in the winter at that time, like, we're not...
Just to open a door.
We're not real farmers, so, like...
You're just to open a door. Yeah. It's different if you had, like, a bunch of chores that you had to go do anyways, but, yeah, to get up that early, just to go open a door is, like...
Or sometimes we would forget at night because we go to bed super early. So then, like, in the summer months, obviously the sun doesn't go down until like 9-ish or whatever, but like we're inside already most times. So then I'm like, oh my god, we forgot to close the chicken door. We actually haven't had any issues, which I'm surprised of just being out in the country. Like we haven't had any wildlife.
Interesting. Do your chickens go into their coop at night by themselves?
It's amazing how regimented they are. Yep, 100%.
Do that?
Nope, they wake up, the door opens at like 5:50, I think, and they like waddle their way out, and then like 9:02 they all venture in. It's crazy. They're like clockwork.
So do you have an automatic door closer too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What happens if a chicken doesn't go in? You're kind of out of luck.
Well, yeah, and we've never had that happen. They all kind of just follow each other. They all just go in. Yeah. And then like it's all gated off. Like they have a pretty big space. Like it's probably by like, I don't know, 15 by 10, like where they can go outside too. And then we let them out of like that space and they wander through the garden.
So they free range.
Yeah, they free range. Yeah.
And you don't have a fenced in property. Do you find they wander to the neighbors or anything?
They do sometimes, but the neighbors kind of like it. They think it's funny. But for the most part, they just like hang out in our compost pile out back, or they go to the garden and
they want to stay where there's food, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then do you... Shoot, I had a question. Oh, you have dogs.
We do have dogs.
How was the experience with getting the chickens with the dogs?
When we got the chickens, we had 2 dogs, and they don't care. Like, they could care less. Bruce, the dog that we still have now, he is, like, super laid back. He just doesn't, like, he just wanders past them and just wants you to throw his toy. Yeah. Luna, on the other hand, the dog that we just got, is wild, the puppy. She's outrageous. So she's tied up, and she will attack them. For sure. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we just leave her tied up. She's just too crazy.
Too rambunctious. She can't be trusted around the chickens.
Nope, definitely not.
If all your chickens look the same, do you have names for them?
I thought about it, and then I was sitting there the first day that we got them, and I was staring at them. I'm like, oh, I could definitely tell the difference. Like, some of them have, like, the thing on top of their head, like, it flops over to the one side, or one's shorter, or, like, whatever. But then it got way too hard. So, there's no names.
We haven't named our ducks either, and sometimes I feel like a bad poultry parent.
Yeah, for
because
sure.
Everyone, they're like, each duck has its own name and its own personality. And I'm like, my ducks travel in a pack of 6, and I can only tell them apart based on their freckle pattern on their beak. And right now, I don't like them, so I don't want to name them. 2 of them do have names, and we can only tell them apart because, again, the freckles, and one of them kind of leads the pack. Ironically, it's a girl that leads the pack. Usually it's the boys. So that one's Tomato, but other than that, like, we don't have them named.
Tomato.
They're identical. They're all completely white.
Yeah,
and
they all look
one of them is like
same.
Slightly shorter, but that's it. Eventually, the boys will get their tail feathers. We have 2 boys and 4 girls. We're pretty sure, just based on the way that they sound. The boys will get their tail feathers, and then it'll be a little bit easier. But
do they swim in your guys' pond?
we have a little kiddie pool for them. We haven't, they're not interested in the pond, and we don't want them in the pond just yet. We did consider setting up, like outfitting our pond so that it can handle the bioload of the ducks. For context, folks listening, ducks, if they have the option, they'll poop in water. We have Indian runner ducks, so they don't swim as much as normal ducks do. So we get poop in the backyard in general. But if you have like call ducks or pecking ducks or something, they're going to be in water all day and they poop in the water. So we didn't want that bioload in the pond until we were ready for it. But we've decided we're not going to have them in the pond for this year. It feels like too much of a hassle. So right now we have a kiddie pool for them. It's not quite deep enough for them. So we're going to get them either a stock tank or a tote and kind of dig it into the ground a little bit. And then I'll have a submersible pump that will pump the duck water into the garden, because fun fact, duck poop is immediately bioavailable, and we've been using it as on-demand fertilizer this year. It's made such a massive difference in the garden.
That's crazy.
So then I'll have a submersible pump with a hose that can pump the duck poop into the garden, and then also it'll have a drain plug too. They need new water every single day, so it gets. When we go outside, I refilled it. Okay, so it's 10:13 right now. Yeah. I refilled it at 8 a.m. and you'll see the color of it. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And again, these ducks aren't in it all day. They're in it like maybe 20-30% of the day. And they get let out. So this morning they got let out at 8. And then they get put in at like 9 o'clock at night. And then they stay in their house all night. It's a house, not a coop. Isn't that weird?
That is weird.
They stay in their coop all night. And then, they come out. So about 20% of the time that they're outside, they're in the pool.
For chickens, they have to have like, I guess that is the roost, like where they sleep on like sticks or whatever. They sleep like off the ground. Yeah. And then it's like a pecking order. Like whoever gets higher is like the more dominant chickens. Interesting. Which is crazy. Yeah. Ducks don't have that?
No. So ducks, their pecking order is typically just done. The thing is, though, ducks are social animals, or chickens are less. Yeah. A duck will actually die sometimes if it doesn't have another duck, so it'll get really depressed. So some people, like their flock will get taken out and there'll be like one duck left over. You have to put a mirror in their coop. So if you have a limited amount of ducks, you put a mirror in their house. Sorry, not their house, not their coop. You put a mirror in there so they think there's more ducks, but no, they travel in groups. And like sometimes the boys can beat up the girls because, especially during, mating season. But for the most part, again, there's one that kind of challenges us and challenges the dogs. And you can tell kind of leads the pack, but they don't really get like super high. There's not really a hierarchy that we can see. Ducks do not go up. So actually our duck house is an old chicken coop. Okay. It's like a, 4 by 8 maybe. And it does have like a roost. It had a ramp up into the roost, but they won't use that. So we just took the ramp out and we just put like stuff in there. So they're just on the main floor. And it's got, hardware cloth and all that, but it's not like insulated or anything. Like we'll have to outfit it for the winter. And then on the base, we actually only for the summer have patio stones down because we spray them off because it
that makes sense. Like we use straw and it's a pain. Like you gotta empty it and
so we'll use straw during the winter so they have a bit of insulation, but for right now we just have the patio stones. They're only in there at night. They don't care. And so we spray it off every day, but not really a pecking order, and they all just kind of huddle and sleep together. So from what we can see.
And then another thing about chickens too, like when we go to get, because I wanted to get new ones this year, but now it's August and it's just time flies. So next year I'm going to be more prepared, I tell myself. You have to introduce them at nighttime.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So then like when they wake up, it's like they've always been there. Because if you don't, they said that like they tend to get more bullied or like because they're not part of the pack yet. So they say that you should introduce them at nighttime and put them on the roost with everybody else, and then
it's just
like a slow introduction.
Interesting. See, we are at our max for ducks. We have 6. We probably won't get more unless something happens. And I think the way that they introduce them is they just put a divider in the coop, like some sort of gate or something, or like put
they get used to them
and the duck in a cage into the house and leave them there for a little bit and let them get used to it. And then just because they're in the same thing, they're in the house, it just becomes more integrated. So
we actually, TJ and I went on a like day date the other day, a couple weeks ago, out to Perth County. We went to like the Perth Wine Farmhouse or whatever it's called, and they let you play with goats. And we've played with goats and stuff before. I've grew up on farms and everything. However, we left there and we're like, we're getting goats. We want goats now. Like, they're just so cute.
Well, they break out
Yeah.
easily. They're little
Yes.
escape artists, so be careful.
Yeah, but that would be my plan also, is to get some goats.
That'd be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Would you just want them for entertainment or milk or something?
More so just like company
Mm-hmm.
and like, yeah, the sheer entertainment of them for sure. If I got adventurous, I would test out the whole milk, but for right now, just to have goats.
Just to have fun, just to play with them.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. Chickens, like for you, seem like it's been going well. And,
Yeah.
And do you guys find you're going through the eggs?
Yeah, for sure. Like, we eat quite a bit of eggs, and then obviously family comes over and is like, "Oh, I'm just gonna take some eggs," which is like totally fine. Like, I'd rather them eat fresh eggs than buy them from the store or whatever, right? Eggs are expensive nowadays, so
yes,
yeah, it's nice to have them on hand too.
Our ducks, they start to produce around 18 weeks. So we incubated the ducks, hatched them. They're about 2 months old now, so 8 weeks. They won't start producing eggs typically until 16 to 18 weeks.
Really?
It's going to be cold by then.
Mm-hmm.
So we're probably not going to end up... So yeah, we got another like 3 months. We're probably not... 3 months?
What'd you say?
No, a lot more. No, we have 10 weeks left. Yes, like 2.5 months. And it'll kind of be cold by then. It'll be, October. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that we're going to get eggs this year. They might pop them out in the winter, but they might also just be like, not in the right headspace because it's cold and they're still babies. So we're probably not going to get eggs until next year. So other than the fertilizer, the ducks are useless right now and they're mean to our dogs. And we don't have a massive property. Like, we're in town and this lot's like, I don't know, 200 by 90 maybe.
Yeah.
And we have lots of space for them and they free range and we have fully gated and it's great. Like, the setup's good, but we're not enjoying them. So I'm like, I hope when the eggs come, like,
at least you're getting something out of it.
Yeah, they're also in our face. Whereas on a bigger property, typically your poultry just kind of does its own thing. Yeah. Right now, like, we have to block them off from the patio, or they come up on the patio and they poop everywhere. So it's a little bit more hands-on. They're a little bit more in our face than, they are on a bigger property. So they're not, like, the maintenance is very low. We change their water every day, make sure they have food and drinking water, clean their coop. Yeah. And that's kind of it. And then check on them, make sure everybody's in good health. But they're also loud. Loud.
Really?
When they want something, especially in the morning when we go to let them out. All of them. And there's four girls. And so honestly, our neighbors say they can't really hear them. Like, sometimes they can, but I think they're lying.
Mm-hmm. But our chickens, like, they're not loud ever. And then, like, on the odd day that, like, they wake up and they just want to be vocal for whatever reasons, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is terrible. Like, I can't deal with this at all. But like, it's like super, super rare, which I was surprised because that's what TJ said too. He's like, aren't these going to be loud? I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think that's just a rooster, but we don't have one.
Yeah,
so.
The roosters are the loud ones.
Yeah.
Even then it's it's not that loud.
Right. And it's not forever. Like, it's not the whole day, but yeah, we like having them. It's like a nice little addition. Like, it's like with the garden and like get your chickens, like, it's just like these slow processes to like,
little urban homestead.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we got going on too. We're in Brantford.
Slowly. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We were kind of talking like, I don't want goats. We're never going to have a big enough property for cows. So like,
what can we do?
We've got the bees, we've got the ducks, we've got the garden.
Yeah.
We've got fish. We could have a little fish farm if we wanted, but I'm not interested.
Bees are definitely on my list for sure. And then like making a bigger pollinator garden is something that like I'm going to map out for next year.
Yeah. Bees are extremely easy.
Mm-hmm.
For anyone listening who's ever considering bees, please look into your bylaws and also ensure that you register with the Ontario Beekeepers Association. There are very strict rules about bees. There's diseases that if your bees get, they have to be exterminated in a very specific way because if those diseases spread to other hives and other colonies, it could
be detrimental.
Be detrimental. So there's just they're very easy, but there's a responsibility and there's ethics associated with having them to make sure that you're caring for them properly and disposing them if you need to. This year, so this is our second year with bees. It's been a massive learning curve. Mm-hmm. We've learned so much, and like anyone who's going to get bees, just understand your first few years are like not going to be what you expect. Last year we got our bees a little bit late just because that's, we had placed our order late. So we were, near the end of the list. And in hindsight, the colony was actually a little bit weak. Mm-hmm. They weren't producing new bees very fast, which means the honey doesn't get produced as fast. We got a decent harvest. But we made a very big mistake over the winter where there's two types of boxes. So you have the bottom box, which is typically taller than the other boxes you see. That's where the queen lives and that's where she makes babies. And then there's a separator between that box and all of the remaining boxes that go on top. And I'll put some pictures in the show notes so folks know what I'm talking about. Then you have the shorter boxes, and that's where the worker bees go in and they make honey. And between those boxes, it's called a queen excluder. And it stops the queen, who's bigger than the worker bees. It stops the queen from being able to get up into the honey boxes because only the queen lays babies. So we want her to lay babies in the bottom box, the brooder box, and then you only harvest from the top boxes. So we didn't take out the queen excluder over the winter. It just wasn't something that, we had seen online that we needed to do. It wasn't something we really thought about. However, the way that bee boxes work is that any liquid and condensation comes down the sides of the box and out the hole at the bottom. But with the queen excluder, the condensation got stuck and it actually ended up drowning the bees. Yeah, so we made a huge mistake. We lost our hive over the winter, which is not abnormal. Fun fact, European honeybees are not native to North America. And with the winters that Canada has, it's quite common to lose hives. So we actually had already placed an order for a new one anyways. We thought we'll either need to replace ours or we'll have a second hive. So it wasn't like that big of a deal. We got a decent harvest, but it was those little tiny details that we didn't realize had such a big impact. During the actual season, we check on them once every 1 to 2 weeks to make sure that they're progressing and to make sure that they aren't dying or they're not being affected. We also do treat them for mites towards the end of the season and a couple of other things. Alex handles that side of stuff. And then we add boxes as we need. And then we also have to make sure that we insulate them properly in the winter so that they survive. But other than that, they're self-sufficient. We haven't really had to do anything crazy for them. Of course, when we lost our hive last year, there was also a little bit of mold associated with losing the hive. So we had to take everything apart and actually take a blowtorch and go over everything just to make sure, there was no issues. And we replaced some frames too. But yeah, very, very easy, but just do a little bit of research prior to. I took a course prior to, and Alex's boss has a honeybee farm. So he was able to kind of guide us a little bit, which was nice. But the actual maintenance in the day-to-day is virtually
minimal.
Nothing. So, yeah. So when you're ready to get honeybees, give me a call. If anyone has any questions, you can message Equal Ground and I can help you. So I'm curious, we've talked about you transitioning from a smaller property to a county property. I imagine that was pretty easy. Did you have to break down the garden beds that you had at your home before you sold the house?
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
So did you lose the season?
Sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was super bummed about it. And I thought for sure, once we moved, I'd be ready to go. We moved in between May and June. So I'm realistically, why, by the time we get the house, I can build them and get in whatever, lettuce, radish, all that type of stuff. And then no, it just was not an option. Moving is just so much work and we had to paint and do all that stuff. So yeah, we definitely lost the season.
Yeah. I would if you need to move properties and most people don't want an entire backyard of vegetable gardens. So typically, you need to seed over them and return the backyard back to quote normal.
Yes. That was a lot. But yeah.
So you mentioned you joined the board in 2018. What did that look like? What prompted you to do that, and who kind of ushered you into that role, and what did that look like onboarding with the board, if you remember?
It was a while ago. So I went, how did that even happen? Yeah, I was involved with Spring Street Gardens and then, Spring Street Buck Park, just because there is another Spring Street.
Yeah, there's Spring Gardens. Yeah.
But, and then Earl Haig was just opening. We were there.
Yeah.
It was this huge thing. I think it was the Millennial Group also that had helped organize that whole big day. So I had reached out to Ben somehow.
Shout out to Ben for doing the graphic design for this podcast.
Yes,
okay, continue.
Thanks, Ben. So I had reached out to him and he had said that Cheryl Antosky was the president and spearheading this whole thing. If you want to come, it's just a drop in, bring a shovel, wheelbarrow, whatever. So I went, put my name down on the volunteer list, did a couple loads of soil, spent the day there helping get our Earl Haig set up. And then I honestly don't even know how I ended up at a board meeting, but I was at a board meeting.
Somebody was like, hi, can you show up at this time?
Yeah, just do this.
Date?
Yeah, it was at the GRCHC.
Yep.
That's where we used to have everything. And then, they were looking for a volunteer coordinator. And it was my first day. And I was like, okay, I guess we'll try this.
That's always what happens. Somebody ropes you into coming to a board meeting or committee meeting, and then you get there and they tell you that there's some sort of need that has to be filled, and then you end up filling it. Yeah. That's kind of how it works.
Yep, pretty much. And then I think my first like year as like the volunteer coordinator on the board was COVID. Like I think it was 2020. Like I got tossed into like, because we couldn't have, I'm pretty sure. Or like my second year as it, like it was pretty early on within like the board itself. So then,
well, the board only technically, so we incorporated in 2018. 2018. I always have to double check with Andrea if it's 2018 or 2019, but I'm positive it was 2018. So before that, it was just a steering committee. Yeah. So you had joined when it was officially a board of directors.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then 2020 hit, obviously with COVID, and community gardens were deemed non-essential. So we had to figure out how else to navigate this. Like we still had a ton of volunteers, people wanted to be involved, and realistically, community gardens was should have been a huge part of that.
People also had all this time on their hands.
Yeah, we had all this time. Like it was a huge value to have fresh local food.
Let's dive into the host garden program then. Tell me how
so then we started the host garden
unfolded.
program. The board came up with this idea that we would help.
Okay, we got another low battery notice, even though I just changed the battery, so just be aware. Okay, continue.
It's okay. So the host garden program, we started obviously in 2020. The board came up with this great idea that we would offer to supply everything for people in the community that wanted to grow their own vegetables. So we've created packages that we would deliver. I went around with Kingston, my stepson, and delivered more. Like that was his summer with me. We were just hanging out, delivering garden beds that we had pre-cut. And Kingston and I would help make them if they needed help. So we made all these garden beds together. Yep.
We're just going to pause. Doug, you going to lay down? Are you going to lay down?
Hey, Doug.
I can't help you right now. Lay down.
Just don't hit the mic.
Yeah, he's going to try and jump. I know he is. Go lay down. Go lay down. Okay, come around. Come around, and then you can come cuddle. Come around.
Come here.
Yes, good boy. Now you may come cuddle with us.
Good boy.
Okay, lay down. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So Kingston and I were going around delivering, making all these garden beds, and then we would set up soil deliveries, whether through the city or through...
Oh, the city did the soil deliveries?
I can't remember.
That's okay. That would surprise me.
Yeah. I think for some they did, but then we used Dragonfly quite a bit, and T. David, we used them also in town to help us with that. And it was something that we had funded through the organization. And then obviously the plant donations and everything else. That was a little bit more difficult and tricky to navigate, handing out the plants at that time, but we still made it work.
So what we do now outside of COVID is we set a date. Usually it's the Saturday of the May long weekend. And prior to this date, all of our gardeners submit like wish lists to us, and then we put the orders together, or they come and they pick their plants, and it turns into just like a 5-hour social time because everyone comes and they want to chat. We chat about gardening, and they meet other gardeners, and they meet, some of our team members that maybe even they've never actually seen in person.
It just felt so. It was less community oriented, which was sad because it was such a big thing for so long. But I'm happy that we're back with that now, obviously. But it was just a strange.
Hard.
Yeah, it was hard because people still want to chat and ask questions, and like that was like where they could get some education and figure out like what they were going to plant, where they were going to plant it. And then it was just like, Kate, plants, see ya. Kate, plants, like.
Yeah, and also a lot of these people were newer gardeners. Maybe they had never done it before. And, that can be pretty daunting as a beginner. As we all know, everyone listening probably knows that. So, I imagine that was difficult. So the host garden program, anyone in Brant County, Brantford, Six Nations is invited to sign up. We'll give you plants, seeds, access to compost and mulch. You actually come pick it up from us, and education and support and things like that. In return, you grow a garden at your home and you donate 20% of your harvest to somebody or something. This could be to a neighbor. This could be to your neighborhood association. This could be to a local pantry, to the food bank, to your mom. It really doesn't matter. The goal of the host garden program was to still give people an opportunity to participate in gardening and sharing and helping feed their communities. Obviously, the garden shut down for a couple of months, and then the provincial government deemed them essential, so they opened up with really strict guidelines where people had to register to volunteer, and there was schedules, and only one person could be in
Fencing,
there. Yeah, all the gardens were fenced. So by having the host garden program, people could still participate and still learn. It just, it was done as an individual task instead. But that program, we've continued now. It's 2024, and this year we had 72 host gardeners, and I think we had about 70 the first year too, right?
Yeah, it dipped a couple like for a couple years now. It's back up.
Yeah, it dipped a little bit.
Yeah, and it's nice to see like people are talking about it. So there's a bunch of new people this year too, which has been really nice. So
we've had a lot of new people, and we just hope that it increases people's ability to produce food. And now of course we have me, and so we're doing food education and stuff like that, and we hope that helps bring people closer to learning to grow their own food and being a little bit more confident. And if you're a beginner and you're listening, or I don't know why you'd be listening to this if you didn't have an interest in growing food, but everybody kind of has to start somewhere, and it really starts with trial and error. And it starts with putting seeds in soil and seeing what will grow. And I don't believe in black thumbs. That's not really a thing. If you have soil, water, and either a plant or some seeds, like you're going to be able to grow something. So it's all just about starting somewhere. And again, if you're in Brantford, Brant County, or Six Nations, registration for the host garden program opens up in the winter. I think this year we did January. We'll probably do it again January for 2025. And you can actually find more information on our website, www.egcgbrant.ca. So that would be Equal Ground Community Gardens Brant.ca, egcgbrant.ca, and you can go to the host garden tab, learn more about the program, and you technically can still, so you could put your name on the list from the 2024 registration, and we'll reach out to you in 2025. So if you want to do it now because you think you're going to forget, just go to the 2024 registration, put your name on there, and then we'll reach out to you, December, January. And again, you submit your list of seeds and plants that you want from us, or if you're not sure, we can give them to you. You can kind of tell us what your garden specifications are, and we can suggest things. You can always reach out to us and we can help you. And we'll provide plant seeds, compost, and mulch access. You need to actually do the garden portion yourself in your garden. But again, you can consult with us, and we can help with that too, and give you advice and material recommendations. I'll put all this information in the show notes, but the program is open to the public. Anyone's welcome to join. It doesn't matter if you're an individual, if you're a massive household. We've even have schools reach out asking, outside of our community garden program, if they can, there's Dougie, he's getting comfortable, if they can participate in the host garden program side of things, and that's totally fine too. So we just like sharing and encouraging people to grow their own food and spreading that language, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. It's such a rewarding thing, I find. Like when you can go into the garden in the morning, evening, whatever, and then just grab like some veggies or like zucchinis. You can have zucchinis every meal of every day. Like it's super
unless
cool.
you're in my garden and the zucchinis wilt after the first two fruits. I don't know what's going on, but I don't like zucchini anyways. Okay, I have a few rapid fire. I say rapid lightly. Rapid fire questions if you're comfortable. This is about your personal experience gardening.
Okay.
What is one thing you dislike about gardening?
What is one thing I dislike about gardening? The unknown. It's scary to me. Like it's not, I guess it's just like the unknown of like how much space this is going to take, or like, is it like, did I plant the tomatoes beside like the basil properly? Or like, I don't know. I overthink it, obviously. Yeah.
Once you pick up permaculture practices, that all goes out the window.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got the mulch, so you're getting there. Okay. Yeah. You start to care less and less about that. Yeah. Last year I did everything. Like I sat down and did everything down to the square foot. And I really wanted to try a very controlled garden last year. And it went really well. I didn't like it though. This year, I didn't plant a single thing. Even though I hosted a whole Plan Your Garden workshop, I didn't plant a single thing in my garden this year. Oh, so much better.
Right? That's 100%.
Do you have any garden goals for this season?
Garden goals. We planted raspberries at the end of last season.
Oof. Yes.
So my garden goal is to keep those alive.
Yeah,
right
I
now,
love that.
To be honest,
you might even get a harvest in the fall, depending.
I have actually had a couple. Oh. So we did like raspberries, and we did golden raspberries. So like, there's very few on there, but like they're still there and they're unreal. We just put golden raspberries in. We got some from Creekview Acres last week, nice. So we just put golden raspberries in. So I'm looking forward to those. Last time I dealt with golden raspberries, I was actually in pastry school, and we used them for a dish, and I was like,
at the time I didn't know anything about food.
I had no idea they existed.
And I was like, what are these?
Yeah.
And then I forgot about them until we were at Creek View Acres last week. And Alex was like, ooh, golden raspberries. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot those even existed.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. What's your favorite vegetable to grow? Not to eat, to grow.
To grow? Beans.
Do you like pole beans or bush beans?
I like pole beans.
Oh, yeah, I do too. I made a really big mistake this year where I sowed pole beans. I put pole beans in the ground. We got a 12-foot bean wall. Bush beans grew.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so you'll see. You'll see.
That's fun.
Okay, then what's your favorite vegetable to eat?
Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, so folks who have been listening to this podcast in chronological order will know about this, but Ruby from Spring Street Buck Park told us about this really cool trick where you can pull the Brussels sprout leaves apart and dehydrate them, grind it up into a powder.
Oh.
Yeah, I was like, oh,
clever.
That's really cool.
We were camping this last weekend and we were talking about like vegetables or whatever. And my girlfriend's son was like, yeah, I like Brussels sprouts. I put them in my smoothie.
Yeah.
And I was like, Jack, what do you mean? Like, what do you think a Brussels sprout was? Because I personally was like, I've never done that. And I'm like, this kid's 10 and like he's telling me he puts Brussels sprouts in his smoothie. I was like, I don't know. And he's describing it. I'm like, man, that's a great idea. Like, you're right. That is a Brussels sprout. So
yeah.
Good on you.
Yeah, so she'll dehydrate them, turn them into a powder because she doesn't really like the taste of them, puts them into her smoothies and
amazing.
They don't taste, you can't taste it.
I love that.
Yeah, I thought that was cool too. Are there any vegetables you don't like?
Not really.
Yeah, you're a holistic person.
I try and eat at least. Well, we try and eat. Like you're supposed to try and eat 30 different vegetables a week within a week.
Oh, I didn't know that. We're gonna have to do another episode about the nutrition side of this. Yeah. Anything that you're struggling with in your garden this year?
Yeah, my Brussels sprouts. I have those cabbage moths and they're crazy. So I tried to cover them up or whatever, and then I went over the other day and they were stuck underneath like whatever I've covered. So most of them I've left 2 out, so they've just been eating those 2. So then the other 6 plants are fine. Yes. Yeah. Trap crops are key for lots of them. So so they've been doing better now.
Oh my goodness. I don't ever have any luck with Brussels sprouts in my garden. However, this year we planted what I thought was broccoli. And then actually, okay, that's a lie. We got a donation from Walter's Greenhouse and they told me in the email it was broccoli, parsley, and cauliflower, I think. But then I made a mistake when I was giving them to people. I was telling them they were Brussels sprouts.
Uh-oh.
And then a couple days later, I was like, oh my gosh, it's broccoli. And I messaged a bunch of people being like, just kidding. I'm so sorry, guys. These are actually broccoli. And then
now
the past couple of weeks at Earl Haig, they are Brussels sprouts, but they're purple Brussels sprouts.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know. And ironically, I planted them in my garden and they didn't do well. And I was like, oh, I've never grown broccoli in my garden. I don't really like growing like those single crops. And then, the Brussels sprouts, honestly, you can almost start harvesting the bottom ones at Earl Haig.
No way.
But I made another mistake. How many times have you heard the word mistake in this? I made another
gardening
mistake.
101.
Yeah. I had planted thinking they were broccoli. I planted them in the middle. I sowed potatoes all around the edge of the bed.
Oh, nice.
And then I planted the broccoli in the middle, and I figured the broccoli is going to be gone by the time the potatoes are even considering maturing. They don't really like each other, but because they're Brussels sprouts, they stayed in the bed. So we harvested the potatoes last week, but I'm going to throw a photo of what Brussels sprouts look like growing in the show notes, but they have their stalks grow tall and then they put out leaves throughout the entire thing and it turns into this like cylinder plant. I had to trim all the stalks so that we could get to the potatoes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, they get big sometimes.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you so much for chatting with me. I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
It's always fun to sit down and just kind of chat with you. So, this has been really good. Thanks, Kat.
Thank you.
Kat, thank you so much for chatting with me. This was honestly so much fun. Now, we recorded this conversation in June and it's now November, so I do have a couple updates for you. First of all, Kat, I know that you don't have mulch in your garden. I know you did not get mulch this year. So I'm going to push this to everyone again. This is an amazing time. This is your tip for the day. This is a great time to get mulch into your garden. Call up a local tree service, see if they'll drop it off for you. You may have to tip the driver. Or if you live in Brantford, There's 4 mulch pickup locations, three mulch pickup locations in the city. You can go, you can get free mulch as much as you want. I will put the link in the show notes. This is such an amazing time to put mulch in the garden, and this is a reminder for me to remind my partner that we need to go get mulch for our garden. So amazing time to do it. Kat, this is your reminder to do it as well. I know I mentioned in the conversation that you could go register for the 2024 host garden program. I've wrapped that up. I've actually launched the 2025 host garden program registration now. So the link in the show notes, you can click it. It'll take you to 2025 registration. You must live in Brantford, Brant County, or Six Nations. If you are outside of those ranges and you still want support, reach out to us and we can see what we can do. Or, if you're interested in starting a program like this in your area, reach out. We love to chat with people. Okay, let's do a quick update on my ducks. During this conversation, I was really gung-ho about having them. We ended up rehoming our ducks in August, and we did this because for personal reasons. It had nothing to do with the space. It had nothing to do with the care of the ducks. It had to do with the fact that the ducks were free range in our space and they actually took over our space, and they made it impossible to enjoy our backyard, which is something that's very important for me and my partner. The dogs no longer wanted to go in the backyard. I didn't want to garden. Every time I stepped foot in my garden, the ducks would come for me. One of them I mentioned in the conversation that we had to keep an eye on her. She ended up kangaroo kicking me at one point, scratched on my leg, and I had to put a tag on her leg so that I'd know she was coming. We really loved having ducks, and I will have ducks again in the future, but when we have a little bit more space. I don't feel comfortable with caging ducks. I would want to make sure that they are free range in whatever situation we have them in, and for us that's only going to work if we have a bit more space. So if you're wanting to cage them, or you don't use your backyard that much, or you do have a space where you can kind of fence them off, go for it. Just be aware that if you have a small space and you're letting them free range, they get kind of territorial almost. And we're people that spend a lot of time in our backyard, a lot of time. And I spend a lot of time gardening, and we had a really hard time with not being able to utilize their space. So we rehomed them the end of August. We had them for 5 months. They never even ended up laying eggs. They went off to a lovely farm in Mount Pleasant, which is just down the road, into a nice big flock. And it allowed us to keep the male ducks and the female ducks alive and together, because we were starting to face issues with rehoming the male ducks, and we were going to have to cull them. So by rehoming all of them together, they were able to stay together and stay alive. I will say, though, having the fertilizer from them pooping in the water made such an incredible difference in our garden this year. And I mentioned it in the conversation. It was something that I had just started doing. And it made a massive difference in the plant health this year. Our cannabis was crazy. So again, if you get ducks, use that duck water. Don't just dump it. Make sure you're intentionally dumping it somewhere. It was incredible. Also, update on our bees. We're now at the end of the second season. I mentioned we got a new hive this year. Not a strong hive, I'll tell you that. They swarmed 3 times, which means, you know what? I feel like we needed an episode on beekeeping. The bees operate on almost like a democracy. The bees did not agree with each other. They wanted a new queen, but the other half of the bees did not want a new queen. So half of them ends up essentially leaving the hive. They did that 3 times, which you can imagine significantly impacts their numbers, which then impacts the amount of honey that they make. We still have a ton of honey from last year, so we are not taking honey from them this year. We're just wrapping them up for the winter with the honey that they have so they can feed themselves this year instead of giving them sugar water. So that's an update on the bees. And if this is something you guys want to hear more about, let me know. I'm happy to chat. I will note that the information that I have is very, very specific to Southern Ontario. And again, these are European honeybees. They're not native to North America. Okay, I think that's it from me. That was a lot of updates. Sorry, folks. Thank you again to the City of Brantford and the Brant Community Foundation for funding this podcast. And also a big thank you to our board of directors for letting me run with this project. The Community Garden podcast is administered by Equal Ground Community Gardens, and you can view this episode's show notes at thecommunitygardenpodcast.ca. Podcast production and editing is by Matt Wilfred at Nuthatch Consulting, and you can get in touch with Matt at nuthatchconsulting@gmail.com. And our graphic design is done by Ben at All Day Breakfast, who we mentioned in this conversation and also used to spearhead the millennial group, Millennial Club. Thank you to our lovely podcast committee, Paulina, Charlene, and Kat, for all of your hard work. And please consider following, subscribing, rating, reviewing, whatever you need to do on your podcast platform so that we can reach more people. This is quite important to the growth of the podcast. You can follow Equal Ground on Facebook at Equal Ground Community Gardens, and you can also join our Facebook support group at the same name. You do not need to live in the area to join that group. You can find us on Instagram at equal_ground, and you can learn more about our organization at www.egcgbrant.ca. If you would like to be on this podcast as a guest, you can email podcast@egcgbrant.ca, or you can visit the show notes page at thecommunitygardenpodcast.ca. And I want to note, it would actually be pretty cool to talk to community gardeners outside of our area, either in other countries, in other growing seasons, just to be able to compare notes. I'm curious to see how you guys do things. So if this sounds like a fit for you, reach out to me. I'd love to chat. And finally, if you are looking for transcriptions of the podcast, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can get it directly in the app. Or you can head over to YouTube. The Community Garden Podcast is now available on YouTube, and you can get captions that way. Okay, awesome. Thanks for bearing with me, guys. I hope I'm not sick next week, but we'll see. Okay, bye.